push open the heavy wooden door, and the first thing you notice is the air. Thick, quiet, almost suffocating. You step softly onto worn carpet, your footsteps barely making a sound, absorbed by the shelves packed tight with volumes of forgotten knowledge. Libraries like this always feel like frozen fragments of time, but tonight there's something more, an uneasy tension hiding in plain sight. Rows upon rows of books stretch out in front of you, illuminated dimly by flickering fluorescent lights humming gently overhead. That faint hum usually comforts, but tonight it feels sinister. You're listening to 102 Hours where stories don't just get told, they come alive in the dark. Late November in Pennsylvania is bitterly cold, a chill that seeps under your collar and curls tightly around your bones. But Betsy Aardsma wouldn't have felt it that night, not in here, not yet. On November 28, 1969, while most of Penn State's campus emptied out for Thanksgiving, Betsy chose the Pattee Library, seeking quiet refuge to complete a research paper. She had no way of knowing she had stepped into her own nightmare. And tonight, as you stand exactly where she stood, you probably won't survive this well. At least your restful sleep, one single quotes. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to 102 Hours, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, why don't you drop your location and the time right now in the comments? I'd love to see how far these chills travel now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let 102 Hours guide you into tonight's journey. You make your way deeper into the stacks, the aisles tight, walls of knowledge pressing closer with every step. The air feels heavy with the scent of old paper, ink, and that unmistakable aroma of books untouched for decades. Each shelf is like a silent observer, watching you move forward. You can't shake the feeling that you're walking towards something dreadful. Your eyes scan the shadows between shelves. You pause to read faded titles on dusty spines, names of books no one's checked out for years, maybe decades. But tonight isn't about old literature. It's about a story that hides deeper than words can convey. You're here, exploring the space, because something terrible happened right where you're standing, yet no one saw it. Or if they did, no one realized until it was far too late. Betsy Aardsma was smart, friendly, and exceptionally driven, a promising grad student with dreams of helping others. But on this evening, her path intersected with someone whose motives remain unknown even now. As you move slowly between the narrow stacks, you imagine Betsy doing the same, perhaps focused, perhaps slightly distracted by her papers looming. Deadline, there's a rustle, faint enough that you're not even sure you actually heard it. You stop dead. Your heart quickens, your breath stills, ears straining. Nothing, just silence again, pressing down even harder, as if scolding your nerves for betraying you. You smile uneasily, probably just your imagination, right? But then your eyes catch sight of a gap in the books, an empty space that suddenly seems ominous. Maybe Betsy paused right here, fingering the edge of a book's spine, entirely unaware that someone was silently approaching her from behind. You shiver involuntarily and keep moving forward, pushing away intrusive thoughts. It's just a story, right? Except this story is true, and its ending is as stark as it is shocking. It took mere seconds, a sudden movement, a brief struggle, not loud enough to draw attention. The attack was swift, precise, clinical. One stab, directly into Betsy's chest, piercing straight through her pulmonary artery. The bleeding was internal, quiet, stealthy, just like the library itself. No screaming, No frantic struggle, just a quiet gasp, a collapse, then silence. A life extinguished between bookshelves, unnoticed by patrons absorbed in their reading. The attacker vanished without drawing suspicion, disappearing into the maze of shelves like a ghost. You glance quickly over your shoulder, an irrational fear gripping your chest. It's hard to feel safe when you realize just how easy it would be to vanish into these rows of towering books, leaving no trace, no witnesses, just a silent horror. Left behind, people walked by Betsy for minutes afterward, believing she had fainted or simply fallen. Blood seeped silently beneath her red dress, disguising the fatal wound. It took two men finally noticing something wasn't right, calling out for help. Confusion etched on their faces for anyone to even acknowledge the tragedy unfolding at their feet. Even then, the first responders had no idea what they were dealing with. A murder in a library. It seemed inconceivable. Unreal. That's part of what makes Betsy's story chilling to this day. Not just the violence itself, but how quietly, subtly, almost politely it occurred. No spectacle, no witnesses, no screams, just a whisper. Attack in a place devoted to silence and study. The killer knew precisely what they were doing, leaving behind almost no evidence, no trace of who or why. And just like that, Betsy became an enduring mystery, her life overshadowed by the unknowable truth of her death. As you stand here, in the quiet heart of the Pattee Library, you understand why this story persists. It's not the violence alone that haunts, but the silence, the unanswered questions, the ease with which it all happened. Investigators still question whether answers could ever emerge from a scene that offered so little clarity. Tonight, the silence around you feels heavier, deeper, as though Betsy herself might still be here, lingering in the aisles between the books, hoping someone will finally see her, hoping someone will finally speak up and break the silence that claimed her life. But tonight, as the library's humming lights flicker briefly, you're reminded once again that some horrors never truly leave the places where they happened. You exhale slowly, reminding yourself to breathe. Yet deep down, you know that silence can hide things darker and more dangerous than any scream ever could. Books crash suddenly to the floor with a muffled thud, jolting your heart into a frantic rhythm. Your breath freezes in your chest. Seconds stretch unbearably long as you wait, perfectly still, listening for movement that never comes. You're certain someone else must be here, but there's only silence, pressing down, heavier than before. Your eyes search the narrow aisles, scanning shadows for any sign of motion. Nothing but empty shelves and endless rows of bound pages. Was it a coincidence, gravity finally claiming a book balanced precariously on the edge? Or is something more unsettling at play? Rationality whispers the former, but the night whispers back louder, darker suggestions. Your pulse refuses to settle. Betsy never had the chance to wonder, as you do now. By the time those books hit the floor, she'd already slipped from consciousness, silently bleeding out among forgotten tomes. Still, it's the delay that haunts you now, the silence following that muted disturbance. No librarian rushing to restore order, no footsteps coming your way. Just a void, a quiet pause in a night already steeped in dread. But the library itself has always carried these secrets quietly, safeguarding them within its walls. A strange part of this case lies precisely in that subtlety. Witnesses from that night recalled nothing extraordinary, nothing startling, an evening like any other. Students hunched over desks, absorbed in reading, a few friends quietly discussing weekend plans. employees performing their routines. It was just another night at Pattee Librarian till it wasn't. And perhaps that's what's most terrifying. How easily normalcy can hide violence. You bend slowly, carefully, to examine the fallen volumes. One title jumps out, oddly fitting: Crime and Punishment, worn edges and faded lettering. Your fingers graze the cover, sensing the quiet accusation of irony in your touch. Investigators never found the exact weapon used on Betsy, but they know it was a knife, slim, precise, brutally effective. And yet, no weapon was recovered, leaving another chilling question hanging unanswered. Could it still be hidden somewhere? Here, among these shelves, forgotten in some dark corner, undiscovered even decades later. You straighten again, glancing warily around. Could Betsy have felt eyes on her? The sensation of someone quietly approaching from behind, footsteps absorbed by the carpeted floors. Or was she entirely unaware until the moment cold steel pierced her flesh? Investigators still question whether Betsy knew her attacker. A stranger killing feels random, frightening. But a known assailant someone trusted, recognized, feels even more horrifying. Did she look into familiar eyes as darkness closed in? Across the decades, people have speculated endlessly on why she was targeted. Betsy wasn't controversial, wasn't confrontational. She was bright, empathetic, dedicated to her studies, and loved by those around her. Nothing hinted at secrets or hidden threats. And yet, someone chose her specifically, executing a swift and silent attack that felt deeply personal. The silence of the crime, the lack of struggle, it all suggests someone who knew exactly how to move, how to strike, how to escape. You shake away the persistent thought, a chill brushing the back of your neck. The library is full of secrets. Yes, but tonight you're chasing the darkest among them. Your curiosity nudges you deeper, retracing invisible steps Betsy might have taken. How many other students have wandered these same aisles, unaware of the dreadful scene once quietly staged? Here, today, crime scenes are sealed off immediately, every detail carefully documented. But in 1969, authorities didn't realize at first they were dealing with murder. When the fallen Betsy was discovered, staff mistook her collapse for fainting, unaware of the internal hemorrhage disguised beneath her crimson dress. While patrons passed her by, cleaners casually restacked shelves and even mopped the floor, unknowingly erasing critical evidence. By the time police arrived, much was already lost, vanished into the quiet routine of the library's night shift. Only later, in the harsh glare of autopsy lights, did the brutal truth emerge. Betsy had been murdered, not stricken by illness or accident. The realization was a cruel shock, setting off ripples of fear and disbelief throughout Penn State. It was already far too late. The trail had gone impossibly cold. Now you stand in the echo of those lost moments. The empty seconds when intervention might have saved her or at least preserved evidence. Those accidental cleaners inadvertently covered the killer's tracks, forever clouding the truth. You wonder briefly if the attacker knew this place intimately, knew exactly how to use the library's routines and quiet efficiency against it. A distant clock chimes softly, the sound barely registering over the hum of fluorescence. You breathe deeply, steadying yourself. Moments like this, the dark quiet between discoveries, are what truly haunt the story. The unknown, the questions without answers, the silent spaces left behind. This is what transforms tragedy into lasting horror. And then, just as you're about to move forward, your foot brushes something small and metallic. You look down, your stomach tightening. A quarter lies quietly on the floor, dull under the dim lighting. Something ordinary, yet its presence feels somehow significant. Fringe theories later whispered that coins and odd items were intentionally left behind at the crime scene in subsequent years, turning tragedy into ritual. But this one probably just lost change at least that's what logic insists. Still, in a place like this, where murder passed unnoticed, even the simplest things take on sinister potential. You resist the urge to pick it up, irrationally worried you might disturb some long-held secret or forgotten truth. Instead, you glance forward, knowing you must continue deeper into the library, deeper into the mystery. The night has barely begun, and already the Pattee Library feels less like a haven of knowledge and more like a crypto-silent witness holding Betsy's unsolved secrets close. Your footsteps echo softly as you move toward the heart of the stacks, into the quiet stillness that cloaked Betsy's killer, away from the fallen books and misplaced coins. Each step is quieter now, more deliberate, as though you're approaching something important, something still hidden in the shadows ahead. The thin calm of the stacks shatters when two hurried voices echo behind you. Somebody help that girl. They aren't shouting, exactly. The words spill out in a breathless murmur that bounces off metal shelving and finds your ears before you even process their meaning. You turn, pulse hammering, and catch the blur of two young men slipping past the end cap, faces tight with alarm. One points down the narrow canyon of books you just left, his hand trembling as though the gesture alone might summon aid. You follow their line of sight. 15, maybe 20 paces away, a small shape lies crumpled on the carpet, books scattered. Like toppled dominoes around a motionless body, your breath catches. Each fluorescent tube above seems suddenly louder, buzzing in reproach. For the seconds you hesitate. Instinct propels you forward, feet hushed by fraying floor tiles as you edge closer to the fallen student. The young men, wide-eyed, linger at the aisle's mouth. One presses a palm to his chest as if steadying a runaway heart. The other keeps, glancing over his shoulder, scanning for authority or, perhaps, for someone far more dangerous. Investigators still question whether the man who uttered that urgent plea was simply a panicked witness, or the killer himself trying to mask his exit behind a flash of apparent concern. The uncertainty tightens around you like a noose. You kneel beside the girl Betsy, her red dress bunched under her as though she merely slipped. No visible blood, no ragged tear. Her eyelashes quiver, then her lids drift shut. A library aide arrives, skidding to a halt, gasping she must have fainted. The aide scrambles for the wall phone, unaware that every slow second leaks life from Betsy's unseen wound. The eerie hush that follows reminds you of another American tragedy, Kitty Genevieve's 1964, whose cries for help in a New York courtyard spawned the term bystander effect. Sociologists later proved people freeze when they think someone else will act first. Here history repeats, but with hushed stacks instead of city windows and whispers instead of screams. True crime textbooks cite Genevieve's whenever they teach how inaction can kill as surely as a blade. Your hands hover over Betsy's shoulder, unsure whether to move her. You see no reason yet to suspect violence, and neither does the aide. Fumbling a whispered report, girl collapsed, second level, maybe seizure. In 1969, no one teaches civilians to look for hidden trauma beneath clothes. You place two trembling fingers at Betsy's neck. Her pulse flickers, weak, frantic, like the wing beat of a trapped moth. A rustling behind you, those two men retreat, backs already turned. One tugs at his jacket sleeve, concealing something you can't quite see. Your skin prickles. You open your mouth to call after them, but the words snag in your throat. They disappear round a corner with unnerving speed. Footsteps fade, swallowed by endless corridors of books and the squeak of an elevator door. Only later will officers admit the moment was lost forever. No names, no clear description, just khaki slacks, a sports coat, maybe wire-rimmed spectacles. Maybe not. Hours afterward, you will find yourself replaying that half-glimpse, wondering if you locked eyes with a murderer fleeing under the guise of helpful alarm. The library aide returns, breathless, clutching a damp towel and accompanied by a janitor still holding a mop. They crouch beside you, dabbing Betsy's forehead, murmuring banal reassurance. You notice damp crimson blooming through the towel's fibers, too deep to match a simple fall. Confusion clouds the aide's face. She doesn't yet grasp that red on cloth rarely lies. Fringe whispers will someday claim oddities littered the scene years after. Librarians report discovering handwritten cards slipped into row 50I. Saw you scrawled in shaky block letters, always left around Thanksgiving. Some call it student pranks. Others believe the killer returns, feeding the legend with spectral breadcrumbs. Tonight, peering down this aisle, you can almost imagine such a calling card tucked between volumes of Latin syntax. The janitor lays books aside with practiced indifference, intent on clearing the mess. When he lifts one thick tome, a single copper bright droplet gleams on the spine before smearing beneath his thumb. He frowns, wipes it clean, and moves unknowingly, erasing trace evidence that modern forensics would cherish. Crime scene preservation, still a budding science in '69, had not yet learned the lesson left by the Boston Strangler investigation just 5 years earlier. Touch nothing. Let experts comb every inch. Betsy's lips turn ashen. You feel her pulse flutter, then falter. Panic presses against your ribs. Somewhere far away, the faint whine of an approaching siren threads through the stacks. Too slow, too late. The aide keeps repeating, "It'll be okay. Help is coming," voice trembling like thin glass. You sense the lie in every syllable. Above, lights flicker, the aisle dims. A hush spreads through the library as word trickles from desk to desk. A girl is down. Students drift closer, curiosity outpacing caution, but staff corral them back, forming a protective semicircle. Whispered theories spark diabetic shock, exhaustion, maybe tainted cafeteria food. No one utters murder. The very word feels obscene within these scholarly walls. You glance again toward the elevator, half expecting the khaki-clad figure to reappear. Remorseful or righteous? Nothing, only reflected bulbs in polished doors staring blankly back. Weeks later, a witness will recall that one man's right hand stayed clenched in his coat pocket as he spoke, the same hand the killer might have used to wield the knife. It's a detail too slight to convict, yet too haunting to forget. Medical responders finally burst through, uniforms jolting the colorless scene with sharp white. They lift Betsy onto a gurney, their practiced efficiency masking the urgency you feel vibrating in your bones. One paramedic peels back the scarf at her neck and freezes, eyes widening at the trickle of blood now visible along the edge of her turtleneck. He mutters something terse to his partner. CPR commences in rapid, fruitless rhythm. You step aside, arms goose-pimpled, only now grasping that this is no simple feint. You taste iron in your own breath, though you know it's only fear. The stretcher wheels away, squeaking protest up the ramp toward the service elevator. As its doors close, the fluttering hum that fills the library feels suddenly accusatory, as though the building itself scolds every delayed instinct, every missed clue. While campus legends later fixate on spectral sightings, Betsy wandering. Row 50. Books toppling at unseen hands. The real horror tonight is mundane. A single unseen blade and a community's slow response. Scholars of criminology still cite the case when discussing the vital golden hour after violent crime, that fleeting window when evidence is fresh and memory sharp. Here, that hour is hemorrhaging away, minute by precious minute. You watch. Personnel tape off the ill-too-late and herd students back toward study desks. Somewhere, the janitor resumes shelving, unaware that his damp mop has scrubbed away more than spilled coffee in the past. Even now, decades on, investigators still question whether those hushed words, "Somebody help that girl," were a cry of genuine alarm or the calculated camouflage of guilt. You replay the scene in your mind, searching every nuance of tone, every twitch of posture. Yet certainty slips through your fingers like dust disturbed by turning pages. For a fleeting heartbeat, you think you hear soft footsteps behind you, a presence lingering where the men once stood. You pivot, but there is only a row of encyclopedias, silent and all-knowing. Perhaps the killer still walks these stacks in memory alone, forever sentenced to wander among books that can't testify. You draw a slow breath, steadying your nerves. The aisle smells faintly of old paper and something coppery beneath already fading. Another librarian waves you away as police sirens grow nearer. Your role here is finished, but the story is only tightening its grip. You step back, retreating into the hush, feeling the weight of unspoken truths settle onto your shoulders like dust. Somewhere beyond these shelves, the night swallows the echoes of those two men, leaving behind an emptiness that feels colder than winter air. A thin strip of yellow tape now flutters at the aisle's entrance, but inside the cordon, the routine of the night resumes with unsettling ease. You watch as two custodians, summoned from another wing, shuffle in with rolling carts plastic, bins stacked with freshly dusted volumes. Their supervisor mutters something about keeping the schedule. Finals week looms, and shelves need order. The irony burns. The very urge to restore calm will smother what little truth remains. One custodian, a middle-aged man with a polka dot bandana, tied pirate style over thinning hair, kneels to gather the books Betsy displaced in her fall. He hums a Sinatra tune under his breath, oblivious to the crimson crescents blooming on page edges. A paperback romance lifts free, revealing a dark stain on the carpet, but he mistakes it for spilled coffee. Without hesitation, he spritzes, cleanser, blots, and rubs briskly swirling Betsy's diluted blood deep into the fibers. Each efficient swipe erases potential spatter patterns, the kind modern analysts can map to reconstruct an assailant's stance. In 1969, few imagined carpets could testify. You raise a hand, about to warn him, but an officer waves you back. Evidence techs are still on the way, he explains, and civilians mustn't interfere. The custodian shrugs off the officers. Perfunctory caution orders are orders and continues. Hardcover after hardcover slides smoothly into place, aligning spines in perfect academic symmetry. With every thunk, the narrative of this crime rearranges. Pages closing on invisible clues. A second janitor drags a canister vacuum down the aisle, its nylon wheels squeaking over worn carpet. He flicks the switch, suction roars, drowning out the library's usual hush. The hose slurps up a scatter of pages, torn loose in the commotion pages, soon to be emptied into a dumpster. They're micro-droplets of blood never to see a lab. A mainstream case study you once read flashes to mind: the 1947 Black Dahlia murder, where detectives lost critical photographs because eager beat cops pocketed souvenirs. History shows contamination is the quiet killer of cold case justice. Here, contamination is practically invited. Someone hands the janitor a spray bottle of industrial cleaner Ritz of lemon and ammonia. He mists the air like a florist tending roses, oblivious to the chemical fog settling onto potential fingerprints. You inhale that sharp scent, feeling it sting the back of your throat. Investigators still question whether this single misguided cleanup erased the killer's latent prints forever, sealing the case's fate within its first tragic hour as you watch. A fringe rumor from campus folklore surfaces. Some students claim the library's maintenance crew kept a trophy box of odd items found during late-night shifts, paper notes, trinkets, occasionally a piece of clothing. No one ever proved it existed, but whispers say Betsy's brown leather purse originally vanished into that box, surfacing days later after news of the homicide broke. You scan the janitor's cloth rags, polished tins, a lost and found crate half hidden beneath mop heads. You wonder what artifacts of tonight might rest there, unreported. Beyond the tape, nervous students cluster, their whispers weaving a tapestry of half-truths. Some claim Betsy was researching controversial Vietnam-era topics that might have angered radicals. Others insist a jealous lover followed her into the stacks. Rumor metastasizes at lightning speed. A radio newscast crackles faintly from a security guard's pocket already. Outside these walls, headlines mutate. Yet inside, the truth continues to fade beneath lemon-scented suds. A detective finally strides in trenchcoat flapping, notepad ready, but the aisle now gleams suspiciously clean. He kneels, frowns at the damp carpet. You sense his frustration mounting as he realizes he's arrived to a sanitized stage. Props rearranged, actors long departed. He removes a penlight, scans for spatter. The beam reveals only faint pink smears that vanish as fibers dry. His shoulders slump. He questions the custodians, but their answers are vague. Just tidying, sir. Didn't know it was serious. Blood. Thought it was rust. You watch him jot notes, lines furrowing deeper with each admission. The moment reminds you of the John Benet Ramsey scene 27 years later, when family friends cleaned kitchen counters while detectives still awaited a warrant. Different decade, same lesson. Crime hates order. Order kills evidence. Nearby, a librarian wheels a cart overflowing with returned books, eager to reopen blocked aisles. She stops. Management had phoned from home, insisting normalcy resume by morning. Finals start Monday. The show must go on. The librarian adjusts her spectacles, peers at the detective. How long will this take? She asks, impatience edging. Her voice he exhales, promising as briefly as possible. Academia and investigation share space poorly. Another officer snaps Polaroids of the scene, flashes bleaching the dim stack into harsh snapshots. Yet many surfaces already bear smeared prints, prints made meaningless by cleaning savants. Forensics of the era rely on powder dusting and chemical fuming. Once oils mix with ammonia, ridges blur beyond use. You feel the negligence like a physical blow. A slender graduate assistant arrives, announcing she'd just found an abandoned pen in a corner booth, burgundy barrel. Gold clip, initials RH, scratched near the grip. She hands it to the officer in a tissue. He raises an eyebrow. Richard Hefner's. The name has not yet leaked to press, but gossip circles know the eccentric geology student often dashed eccentric notes in burgundy ink. Still, this pen could belong to anyone. The assistant shrugs. She merely wished to help. The officer seals it in an evidence bag, uncertain if it's treasure or trash back at the aisle. The bandana-clad custodian flips a final book upright, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, then steps back to admire his symmetry. You spot a faint blood smear on the lower jacket corner. He notices you staring, follows your gaze, pales. With a guilty grimace, he produces a rag and wipes the cover clean before sliding it away. Your stomach lurches. A moment earlier, the smear could have been DNA. Now it is citrus-scented nothing. Time spirals forward. Dispatch radios confirm Betsy has been declared dead on arrival at Center Community Hospital. The detective closes his eyes, absorbing the news. When he opens them, the frustration has solidified into grim resolve. He orders the aisle sealed indefinitely. Too late. Still, evidence techs arrive, carrying tweezers, swabs, luminol spray tools, powerless against what has already been erased. He walks the length of the stacks, asking each patron their name, seating location, whether they saw anyone running. Your mind flicks to the Boston Library murders of 1992. 2 cleaners found bound in a reading room. The killer escaping unseen, the crime unsolved for years despite witness interviews lining entire binders. Libraries, it seems, grant ghosts a head start. One student recalls a faint perfume lingering in the air moments after the books fell floral, unfamiliar. You inhale deeply now, searching, but catch only lemon ammonia. Could the killer have worn centers small, telling vanity? Or does memory warp under stress? Investigators still debate whether sensory recollections from that night can be trusted or are mere echoes of fear. The janitor kills the vacuum. Sudden quiet settles over the aisle like fresh dust. Shelves stand immaculate, an illusion of peace restored. Yet beneath nylon fibers, the carpet still holds secret microscopic cells that decades later, new science might coax into confession. But in this moment, that hope feels distant, almost naive. The detective finally faces the custodians. His voice is low, weary. He informs them this is now a homicide. Bandana Man's mop handle slips from his fingers, clattering on tile. Shock blossoms across faces that moments ago were calm with routine. The vacuum operator swallows hard, realizing the roaring machine may have devoured proof. Regret hangs thick, but regret cannot rewind. You step back, heart aching with impotent anger. Every motion you witnessed the spray bottle missed. The reshelved romance novel now feels like a slow-motion betrayal. Knowledge, once loose and messy, has been filed away, sanitized, unreachable. And you understand, with chilling clarity, that Betsy's voice is already fading. Drowned not by the murderer's blade, but by ordinary people's eager return to order. Lights blink overhead. The library's closing announcement crackles through. Tin speakers. Thanks for visiting Pattee Library. Please make your way to the exits. The cheerful tone jabs cruelly at the scene. The detective pockets his notebook, eyes narrowing at the speakers, as if the building itself conspired to hurry him out. You linger a moment longer, staring at the spotless shelf where crimson once glimmered. Knowledge stands tall again, but truth has been shelved deeper, perhaps forever out of reach. You back away, footsteps slow, carrying with you the sour scent of lemon and the heavy certainty that tonight's delay will echo through decades of unanswered questions. The coroner's workspace gleams under sterile light, but the smell of antiseptic can't mask tonight's accusation. You stand beside Dr. James Kelly as he pulls Betsy's chart. One line, penetrating trauma. Thorax, one wound, one life. Simplicity, he warns, is often the most vicious teacher. He lifts the sheet, a tiny puncture just left of the sternum node, wider than a pencil rests on skin-gone porcelain from loss of blood. Kelly traces the entry point. Blade slipped between. Ribs, angled up, nicked the pulmonary artery. He explains in calm syllables that make your stomach clench. Inside her chest, blood flooded the cavity while the library kept its hush. You picture how quick it was. Kelly estimates she had less than a minute of awareness. A sudden dizzying drop, then collapse. That kind of precision recalls the 1978 umbrella attack on dissident Georgy Markov, another murder achieved through a pin-sized wound with catastrophic effect. Photos are taken, calipers gauged with thunder, half a centimeter. Was it a stiletto, an ice pick, a hunting knife sharpened to a needlepoint? Kelly shrugs. Investigators still question whether the weapon was chosen for stealth or seized in grim spontaneity. He notes the absence of defensive cuts. Betsy never raised an arm. Either she trusted the approach or never saw it. The silence of the stacks becomes even more menacing, a place where surprise requires no force. X-rays glow on the lightbox, rib shadows framing a hazy pool where lung met blood. You hear Kelly's soft verdict, clean, upward, left to right. If the killer was shorter, the angle fits. If Betsy bent for fallen books, it fits too. One detail, two competing pictures. From an envelope, Kelly removes a silver necklace, clasp broken. Campus whispers insist the missing coil still travels with the killer, a morbid keepsake. Kelly logs it without comment, seals it away. A lab tech wheels in reagents for trace fiber and metal. You recall the Walker family murders of 1963, solved, when a single rayon thread linked suspect to scene. Here, custodians have already mopped and vacuumed, maybe erasing similar slivers before science could arrive. Kelly finishes the Y incision, closes with brisk sutures, then washes long and hard. Hardest part, he sighs, is how neat it looks. Violence hidden behind an almost courteous wound in a briefing room nearby. Detectives crowd a scarred oak table littered with evidence bags. Betsy's red dress lies stiff beside a burgundy barrel pen found in a reading booth. Its ink matches Richard Hefner's lecture notes, but chain of custody wobbles coincidence or breadcrumb. A sergeant sketches escape routes on a map, red star for Betsy, blue arrows for exits. Row 50 gets a bold circle. The killer could vanish in 10 seconds if he knew the maze. Someone notes Hefner's geology lab 2 floors below. Another reminds the room he's only one of several names whispered. Polaroids shuffle through gloved hands. One shows a dust-free rectangle where a book is missing. No title, no checkout slip. Did the killer use it as a shield, then misshelve it elsewhere? The question hangs like stale smoke. You step into the hallway, lungs greedy for unfiltered air. Fluorescents stretch forever, humming over waxed linoleum. A memory surfaces, Danny Rolling, the future Gainesville Ripper, whose careful initial stabs concealed ferocity. Precision can mask rage. Back inside, Kelly signs the preliminary report. Time of death, 4:55 p.m., cause. Exsanguination from pulmonary artery puncture. 3 short lines that compress a life into data. Detectives revisit trajectory. upward 9 degrees, left to right. Detectives remain unsure whether knocking books to the floor was a tactic to make Betsy crouch, perfectly aligning her chest with a waiting blade. A curious footnote in Kelly's margins snags your eye. Trace pine resin at wound track. Pine in a library, perhaps a wooden handle or sheath transfer. The Lindbergh kidnapping famously pivoted on lumber matching. Even resin might bloom into a lead. Detective Rivera orders comparisons with forestry tools, art department chisels, rock hammers sealed in pine pitch. The list grows, sticky, branching like sap on bark. The tech swab for microscopic flecks, the killer wiped on trousers. A rookie. Detective recalls the Sam Shepard case, where flawed blood evidence warped the trial until spatter signs matured an echo that warns them to tread carefully. Kelly measures cavity depth, 3 1/4 inches. Short for a hunting knife, long for a pocket blade. The sweet spot sparks speculation. A vintage Italian stiletto beloved by collectors, or a hand-filed spike lacquered with resin to keep rust at bay. A veteran cop murmurs a quirky tidbit. A student once told friends that a strange man who smelled like Christmas trees sat near Betsy in the cafeteria days earlier. The pine link pricks ears, but no one writes it down to anecdotal. To unreal yet, the seed is planted. Kelly flips through his dog-eared forensic pathology, reading aloud about incomplete withdrawal wounds, where muscles tighten around. A retracting blade, sealing the entry like a drawstring and hiding abrasions. The passage could explain why Betsy bled inward instead of onto her dress. Hours of talk ebb into a reflective lull. Somewhere beyond the walls, refrigeration units hum a mechanical reminder of the cost behind every chart. Midnight nears, ashtrays brim, coffee scorches. Momentum builds, yet chill accompanies it. The cleaner the injury, the thinner the narrative. Kelly locks the morgue doors. Gurney wheels echo as Betsy heads to refrigeration. Outside, frost grits under your shoes. A car radio crackles about Apollo 12's. Safe returner, giant leap contrasted by one small, lethal step inside a university library. Breath fogs the cold. That tiny wound, no bigger than a fountain pen nib, now feels cavernous, a rift between truth and conjecture, until someone finds the hand that held the blade. Betsy's story remains like that puncture, deceptively small, impossibly deep. You return to Pattee Library at dawn, when the building sits hollow and echoing. No students, no whispered study plans, only the clipped heels of detectives landing like metronome ticks on terrazzo. Overnight, crime scene tape has multiplied into a crooked spiderweb, but it can't mask the scent of lemon cleaner that still ghosts the air. You trail behind Detective Rivera and a fresh-faced rookie carrying a battered kit of fingerprint powder, feeling the chill of opportunity already lost. Rivera pauses at the reference desk, notebook open. "We start from zero," he mutters. "Zero fingerprints, zero murder weapon, zero clear motive yet, limitless questions." He dispatches officers to canvass exits, to double-check sign-in logs, to pull library circulation cards. You watch them hurry away like chess pieces placed too late on the board, down in the stacks. Technicians dust book spines row by row, black powder blooming against cloth covers. Now and then a latent print appears, smudged, partial, useless. The rookie curses softly at each one, obscured by streaks of cleaning solvent. Investigators still question whether a pristine handprint once lingered here, burned away before dawn. Rivera flips to a sketch he drew on lined paper. Betsy's position, relative to possible exits, for escape paths branch like arteries. any, could have funneled the killer into anonymity within seconds. He circles an emergency stairwell door, reported out of order that night. Latch stuck half open after a maintenance crew's recent overhaul. Maintenance denies it. Security claims it was locked. A janitor insists he propped it for airflow. Conflicting testimonies snarl into a knot colder than the November wind to untie it. Rivera leads you down concrete stairs so stark they seem carved from slate. Each level hums with ducts and fluorescence. Midway, he discovers flecks of dried something on a handrail. The rookie swabs reluctantly, too little, too late, but protocol demands hope. You picture those flecks as blood spatter, though rational. Mind whispers rust, paint, anything mundane. Later that sample will test inconclusive. Another nearly clue. Back upstairs, a forensic photographer maps the aisle with numbered markers. He hesitates over marker 7, a gap exactly 6 inches wide. On the shelf face, the missing title, no one knows. A librarian thinks it was a Pennsylvania historical register. Another swears it was juvenile fiction. Either way, the gap sits like a pulled tooth, an empty socket hinting the killer may have removed a book. Perhaps to cloak the blade, perhaps to leave a message. That volume, if it ever existed, has never resurfaced. Decades on, collectors scour. Estate sales for a library copy sporting a single puncture through page 203, a MINSTREAM. Historical fact drifts into Rivera's monologue. He recalls that just 2 years earlier, in 1967, the FBI launched the National Crime Information Center, a computer database linking agencies nationwide. A revolution in cross-jurisdiction alerts. Yet Penn State's campus police still file most reports on triplicate carbon slips stacked in metal drawers. The gulf between technology and practice yawns. Any inquiry about a traveling offender will take days, maybe weeks. Time that a careful killer can use to vanish across state lines. Rivera assembles a roster of potential witnesses. Every student who swiped an ID at the front desk within 2 hours of the murder. The list is a phone book in miniature names, scrawled, addresses half legible, dorm phones that rarely ring past curfew. You join officers knocking on doors across campus, waking bleary undergrads with polite insistence. Did you see anyone running? Did you hear a scream? Did you smell pine? Recollection crumbles under sleep deprivation, details blur. One student insists he heard a woman laugh, not cry. Another is certain the overhead lights dimmed at the moment of impact, though power logs show no surge. Witness memory, Rivera mutters, is clay left in the sun. It cracks faster than you can mold it. Back at headquarters, a chalkboard blooms with theories. Column A, personal motive jealousy, secret affair, academic rivalry. Column B, random predator drifter, thrill killer, opportunist. Column C, misidentified gender. Could Betsy have been mistaken for someone else in her crimson dress? Rivera pins index cards under each column, but gravity soon drops most to the floor. None fit snugly enough. A quirky tidbit surfaces when an English professor arrives with a cardboard box labeled Anonymous Returns. Every term, he explains, books that vanish mysteriously reappear in his office, usually around finals week. He hands Rivera a slim dentistry manual turned in that very morning, odd, because it belongs to agricultural sciences, not English literature. Inside the front cover, someone scribbled "bite down" in green ink. Rivera pockets it. You sense a fleeting shiver. No record ties the manual to Betsy. Yet some late-night theorists will spin that phrase into dark allegory. Maybe the killer threatened, maybe mocked. The marginalia becomes one more pebble on a mountain of maybe day wears into night. Rivera phones the hospital, requesting samples of Betsy's clothing for fiber comparison. Lab chemists work under harsh fluorescent arches, searching for a shred of denim, a blonde hair, flecks of aftershave, anything. What they find instead is a single microscopic filament dyed sky blue, lodged in the dress's knit. Under SEM imaging, its cross-section matches cheap nylon rug fibers common to dormitory hallways. Could be transfer from the library carpet. Could be from a killer's trouser cuff. The filament is documented, bagged, mostly forgotten. 35 years later, when mitochondrial DNA tests finally mature, that filament will hold no root, hence no profile science's cruel limit. Rivera convenes a late meeting with campus police, state troopers, and the district attorney. Cigarette smoke coils above the table like spectral punctuation. They debate press, strategy, release details to spark tips or withhold to catch the liar. The DA elects caution. Only the wound's existence and approximate time will reach newspapers. Reporters bristle, sniffing conspiracy. But boundaries stand for now. On the walk back to your car, you pass maintenance sheds, glowing sodium yellow. One door sits ajar. Inside, wood braces and tarps lean against pine-scented lumber fresh. Boards destined for library shelving upgrades. You breathe that forest smell, sharp as resin, and memory jolts to Kelly's margin note. Trace pine. Coincidence echoes too often in this case. You mention it to Rivera. He sends a team to inventory every chisel, every thin-bladed tool in the carpentry cage. Inventory sheets reveal nothing missing, yet one apprentice confesses he sometimes borrows a slender craft knife to trim shelf backing. It lives in his apron, he says, and yes, he was working overtime the night of the murder, but in a distant annex, nowhere near the stacks. His alibi checks, yet doubt lingers like sawdust in winter air near midnight. Rivera writes the first official summary. Case status cold by circumstance. A phrase that will haunt press clippings for decades. Cold before fingerprints dried. Cold before blood cooled. Cold while custodians still mopped fluorescent aisles. You feel the chill settle into your own bones. You've witnessed investigations start slow, but never freeze this fast. As you leave campus, frost glitters on empty walkways. Library windows glow faintly behind drawn shades. Inside, crime scene lights still flicker. Somewhere beyond that glass, a blade might still rest in a forgotten nook, blade edge glinting beneath dust. Or perhaps it rides in a pocket of the student who now sleeps 3 dorms away, breathing calmly beneath a poster of Woodstock peace signs. Investigators still question whether the killer slipped out through that faulty stairwell or strolled right past uniformed officers, heart steady, face unreadable. You close your car door, exhale a plume of white, and taste the bitterness of a case already numbing. The night air feels colder than any Pennsylvania winter should, as though the unanswered questions themselves have drawn heat from the campus. Engines sputtering to life, you glance once more at Pattee Library, its brick, facade silent, watchful. You suspect it will keep its secret well, but you also know an investigation, even one born cold, never truly sleeps. It only waits for science to sharpen, for memories to thaw, for one loose tongue to stir embers back to flame. You sit across from Richard Charles Hefner in a cramped campus interview room, the stale scent of instant coffee hanging above scratched formica. He's 25, lanky, hair slicked as if tamed moments earlier, horn-rimmed glasses magnifying, eyes that never quite settle. One knee bounces, a tiny seismic tremor befitting a geology graduate student. who spends days measuring fault lines in sandstone cores. You study the nervous cadence of his breath, wondering if he's cataloging the strata of every sentence you utter. Detective Rivera starts gently. "Where were you Friday afternoon?" Hefner answers with academic precision. "Teaching lab." At 3, quick dinner at Findlay Commons. Pattee Library by 4:30 to gather articles on Devonian fossils. He delivers these details like labels on specimen, tray-specific, but oddly sterile. You recognize the rehearsed quality. Rocks may record eons, but human memory to tidy can be sediment covering something messy beneath. Rivera slides forward. A witness report. 2 students claim a man in a tan sports coat and wire. Rims brushed past them near row 50 seconds after books crashed. Hefner's lips twitcher, micro-quake. He owns such a coat, yes, but so do half the teaching assistants on campus. He pushes up his glasses, leaves a faint smear on one lens. Rivera notices the gesture, notes it down. Finger smudge could hide a tremor. A mainstream historical fact threads through your mind. In 1970, mere months from now, the FBI will formalize offender profiling under Howard Tetton and Patrick Mullany, heralding a new era where behavioral quirks like become data points, not gossip. But tonight, such analysis is embryonic. Rivera relies on intuition sharpened by years of burglaries, not psychological grids. Hefner volunteers that he may have walked by a girl in red, but insists he heard no scream. Your pulse spikes at the color reference. Police withheld. Betsy's dress detail from press. Rivera's eyebrow lifts imperceptibly. Hefner adds that he left the library before 5, hurrying to a geology grad mixer. When pressed for names, he offers to both confirm later that he arrived late, jittery, and excused himself often to make phone calls. Payphone records, however, reveal no outgoing calls at those times. Investigators still question whether those phantom phone breaks were stress relief or attempts to fabricate alibis in real time. Rivera produces the burgundy barrel pen recovered from the reading booth. Hefner identifies it as identical to his own brand, but claims his pen sits safely at home. Officers eventually search his apartment. One pen is present, but ink analysis shows a slightly different formulation. Close cousin, not twin. Circumstantial tension thickens. Proof remains elusive. You watch Hefner's fingers drum a Morse-like rhythm on the table. He mentions his master's thesis current indicators in Uniata sandstone offered as reason for his presence on level 2 where geological journals reside. Yet that aisle lies 40 yards from row 50. Rivera asks why he detoured. Hefner stares a heartbeat too long before shrugging, murmuring something about searching for atmosphere, quiet corners aiding concentration. The excuse stands, wobbles, then holds barely dot. A quirky tidbit surfaces when Rivera reviews campus security notes 4 weeks earlier. Hefner reported his bicycle stolen, then withdrew the complaint after neighbors spotted him riding it. He claimed misunderstanding, yet the officer at the time scribbled odd effectless at inappropriate moment. Small, strange footnotes can loom large when blood is involved. Interview ends. Hefner signs his statement with deliberate loops. His signature sprawls outside the box, almost defiant. Walking out, he pauses to straighten a potted fern in the hallway, a flick of caring that feels rehearsed. Rivera exhales. You sense his frustration. Nothing sticks. Outside, bruise gray. Clouds gather, mirroring the investigation. You trail Rivera to the geology building. He chats with Hefner's advisor. who praises Richard's intellect but concedes social quirks, strict routines, discomfort with loud noise, an obsession with volcanic heat signatures that sometimes slides into monologues. None of that equals murder, but neither does it absolve. Rivera collects Hefner's teaching schedule. Friday labs ended at 3:15 p.m. Library visit plausible. Parking logs show Hefner's turquoise VW Beetle entered the lot at 4:12 p.m. Exited 5:22 p.m. The timeline dovetails with Betsy's final minutes, like misaligned rock layers nearly matching. Close, never flush. Campus gossip now roils. Flyers appear. Do you know Richard H. helped solve Betsy's murder? Dean of Students orders them removed, citing due process. At late-night diners, patrons debate guilt over coffee dregs. Some recall seeing Richard in library corridors, muttering to himself. Others insist he tutored freshman volunteers with patience. Lines blur. You realize community memory is a fault zone. Press one side and stories shift, reshaping the landscape. One evening, a student named Sue emerges with a revelation. Hefner allegedly confided that he knew something terrible in the stacks. She can't recall exact wording, only his trembling voice. Rivera records her statement, aware hearsay wobbles in court. Days later, Sue retracts, citing exam stress. Credibility fractures. Still, the seed of suspicion roots deeper. Mainstream headlines about other cases seep into conversation. Boston's 1968 Harvard Library murder of Jane Britton, fresh on everyone's mind, also pointed first at a known acquaintance before DNA. Decades later, exonerated him. Rivera reads that article aloud in the squad room, cautioning his team. Circumstance isn't certainty. Yet Hefner remains center stage because there is no understudy. He fails a polygraph question concerning knowledge of the weapon. Examiner marks deceptive response. Polygraphs of the era garner weight, though later courts deemed them unreliable. Rivera notes it anyway, another tremor in shallow soil. Then a whisper about Hefner's car. Mechanics recall a cloth rag in the trunk, stiff with something brownish. Police seize the Beetle. Lab tests reveal the substance is varnish, not blood. Another would-be revelation crumbles. Frustration mounts like pressure beneath tectonic plates. A snowy Tuesday, Hefner appears unannounced at headquarters with typed notes recounting his movements, minute by minute. The gesture strikes you as both helpful and suspicious, the way a guilty geologist might chart everything to prove control. Rivera thanks him, files the chronology, later spots minor inconsistencies, 3 minutes lost here, a bathroom break. Unverified there, too small for arrest, large enough to itch dot. Campus winter passes, spring blossoms, investigations stall. Hefner graduates, accepts a teaching assistant. Rumor claims he seldom enters Pattee Library now, preferring microfilm in a different hall. Some think fear drives him. Others see avoidance of crime scene reminders. Investigators still question whether his retreat signals trauma or survival. Instinct, years drift. In 1975, Hefner's name surfaces again when a former roommate reports late-night confessions, nightmares of red-dress girl waking to smell pine. Police interviewed the roommate, timeline fogs, alcohol involved. Hefner, contacted, dismisses the story as revenge for a rent dispute. The file thickens by millimeters. Proof still paper thin. Your narrative eye zooms to a 1980 newspaper clipping. Hefner denies involvement publicly, stating he prays daily for Betsy's family. The statement draws scorn in letters to the editor. Sections, Some call it showmanship. Others argue no killer would invite scrutiny decades later. In 2002, as DNA testing surges, police retrieve archived swabs from Betsy's dress. They hope for a miracle skin cells from the assailant. The lab reports profiles too degraded for comparison. The cold case team size, again circling Hefner, but finding only shadows. He died in 2005, heart failure, leaving no layers of curiosity calcified into legend. Even now, campus tours whisper about the geology man, how he lingers in spirit near display cabinets of trilobite. Fringe podcasts recount that spring evenings sometimes carry a faint pine scent near row 50, as though Hefner's ghost still paces, clutching an invisible stiletto. Logical minds dismiss the aroma as floor polish introduced after a 1994 remodel, but legends sprout where evidence withers. You step from the interview room's memory into present silence. The chair where Hefner once sat is now storage. Its vinyl cracked, but a faint impression remains as though made by ghostly weight. You run a fingertip along the indentation, pondering what hidden faults line every human shift subtly. Others rupture catastrophically. Did Richard Hefner's strata conceal a pocket of violence? Or was he merely a convenient outcrop for investigators searching barren ground? For now, the question stays buried. The earth seldom yields its truths without years of pressure and patience, and sometimes, even after continents collide, the core secret remains locked beneath miles of stone. You drift through the Friday night campus buzz, hearing every whispered rumor thicken around Betsy's death like cigarette smoke under a dorm stairwell. Curiosity becomes currency, and you exchange it with strangers who lean close, eyes bright. With morbid possibility, no one trusts the official silence anymore, so theories breed in the hollows left by facts. You open your notebook, part investigator, part late show host, ready to map the wild terrain of speculation. The first rumor you encounter is the most sensational. Ted Bundy did it. A sophomore insists the timeline matches Bundy traveled the East Coast in 1969, recruiting volunteers for Nelson Rockefeller's campaign. You pause, picturing his calculating grin, slipping between library stacks, scouting vulnerable prey. Yet known Bundy itineraries place him back in Washington that Thanksgiving. Still, the idea flares because it offers a tidy monster, a face to pin on the darkness. Mainstream true crime lore reminds you that Bundy's confirmed murders begin in 1974, but earlier crimes remain possible. Criminologists cite signature drift in nascent killers' testing methods years before escalation. Investigators, however, find no link, no rental car receipts, no hotel registry, nothing but campus gossip craving notoriety. Investigators still question whether the rumor sprang from fear or from an uncanny instinct that evil often moves earlier than we notice. Another whisper says the murder hides a drug deal gone wrong. The late 1960s swirled with countercultural SD. Tabs slipped inside, paperback covers, amphetamines bartered over coffee pots. One senior swears Betsy uncovered a hidden stash taped under a shelf, angering a supplier. You trail him to row 37, where he points out a faint rectangular discoloration on the underside of a metal bracket. Could adhesive residue confirm the story? You scrape it with a thumbnail. It flakes like aged gum, ambiguous at best. Still, you log the location, imagining a clandestine exchange lit only by overhead fluorescents. Voices hushed, a blade brandished to enforce silence. Years later, crime historians will note that Penn State saw fewer narcotics arrests than many campuses of the era. evidence that the drug hit theory might be smoke without fire. Yet absence of proof rarely kills rumor. It only feeds its mythic appetite as you cross Pollock Road. Brisk wind whipping dead leaves in spirals. Another theory ambushes you. Betsy was collateral damage in a clandestine affair. Some claim she caught 2 professors in a compromising embrace among theology texts, and one panicked to keep tenure intact. The story reeks of Victorian melodrama, yet you jot it down, aware that library stacks do double as secret alcoves. Quirky tidbits surfaces from facilities records. Weeks after the murder, janitors discovered handwritten love poems folded into books on row 50, all signed with the initials A and B equals. No one knows when those notes were placed before Betsy's death or after, but the hearts dotting the ampersand feel eerie, like romantic graffiti in a shrine to tragedy. Inside the student union, you join a midnight bull session where amateur sleuths swap theories alongside stale pizza slices. One engineering major proposes a physics-inspired scenario. The killer rigged a book to topple, luring Betsy into crouching, thus aligning her chest precisely with a waiting blade sliding through shelving gaps. You raise an eyebrow but imagine the mechanical elegance. Mainstream precedent exists. Think of the 1888 Whitechapel murders, where Leather Apron allegedly used distractions to isolate victims in narrow alleys. The engineer sketches force vectors on a napkin. The diagram looks plausible until you remember human unpredictability rarely obeys equations. You roam again, letting rumors find you like radio signals. A freshman whispers of occult rites, claiming Betsy studied anthropology texts about Celtic blood rituals, angering a secret society. He describes wax drips found on the floor near her body, shapes resembling runes. You know custodians burned candles for lost and found vigils. Every finals week a mundane origin, yet symbols cling to folklore more fiercely than bleach clings to fiber. You scribble wax with a question mark, promising to ask evidence techs whether any drippings were catalogued. They were not. Mops erased them. A more grounded theory emerges in a dimly lit cafeteria corner. A man in maintenance blues often loitered outside the women's dorm, handing out campus map bookmarks. Students remember pine, cologne, and an unblinking stare. Could he be linked to the resin trace Dr. Kelly found? You note the description: stocky, mid-30s, receding hairline in cross-reference work logs. No employee matches exactly, though temporary contractors rotate through maintenance like faces in a flipbook. You wonder if the timeline hides a ghost worker paid off books, an invisible man with keys to every stairwell. Mid-conversation, a television in the lounge blares a news segment about the 1954 boy in the box case, still unsolved 15 years later. The anchor mentions how public speculation both aids and obstructs investigations. That mainstream example hits home. In that Philadelphia tragedy, thousands of leads flooded in, yet none solved the mystery. You realize your own rumor collecting might clutter as much as clarify. Still, speculation serves a purpose. It keeps a case alive, preventing it from slipping into archival entropy. At 2 a.m. you slip back into Pattee Library, now guarded by a lone security officer half dozing under tungsten light. With permission, you wander row 50, letting silence amplify your senses. Books stand at attention, each spine a quiet sentinel. You press your ear against cold metal shelving, half expecting a heartbeat from the past. A faint dislodged thought surfaces. What if the killer didn't plan at all? What if sudden rage sparked over an academic disagreement, a citation error, a borrowed textbook never returned. Homicide often sprouts from petty grievances cloaked in lethal impulse. Criminology textbooks cite the 1914 Leo Frank case, where a factory dispute escalated to murder and wrongful conviction, fueled by rumors and bias. A soft click echoes just the HVAC cycling, but adrenaline surges, reminding you why fringe theories flourish. Fear empties rational shelves, making room for imaginative dread. You glance toward the ceiling vents, imagining a slim knife shoved into ductwork, lost among cobwebs. People have found murder weapons hidden in attics decades later. Stranger things exist on evidence locker shelves. You kneel, flashlight sweeping carpet fibers. There, beside a molding strip, lies a matchbook printed with the logo of the brewery, a bar 5 blocks away. Could the killer have dropped it? The matchbook looks aged, edges fuzzed, likely discarded by countless patrons over years. Still, you pocket it as a keepsake of possibility. Some future forensic breakthrough to trace pollen. Some might read its history like a diary, while you catalog curios. Campus police finalize a list of persons of interest stretching well beyond Richard Hefner, a janitor dismissed for theft, a philosophy adjunct rumored to write violent fiction, a traveling book salesman whose check-in card shows he visited State College that week. Each line of the list births a fan club of believers. Dormitory billboards start featuring homemade suspect charts, red yarn linking mugshot photocopies to hand-drawn maps of Row 50, true crime, fascination, years before Netflix binge. Culture still thrives in analog form index cards pinned to corkboard, speculations scrawled in Bic. One chilly dawn, you join a candlelight vigil outside the library. Students clutch styrofoam cups of cocoa, voices low as they share personal theories. A girl with a knitted scarf suggests the attacker was female, explaining the lack of confrontation. Women, she argues, elicit less alarm when moving close in tight spaces. The idea of a woman wielding the blade unsettles some, liberates others, shattering preconceived shadows. You note it. FBI stats show roughly 11% of homicides then involved female offenders, but very few stranger-on-stranger stabbings. Still, impossibility never stopped, rumor. As candles gutter, you reflect. Speculation may feel chaotic, but each wild idea keeps Betsy's name spoken, her memory circulating like warm blood through a cold campus. Yet you worry that amid sensational tales, Bundy sightings, occult wax, illicit lovers, the simple, solvable truth might drown unnoticed. You close your notebook, pages swelling with theories, resolving to sift hearsay like a prospector panning a river washing away. Glittery fool's gold until only dense nuggets remain. You step back from row 50, leaving whispers to swirl behind. You, somewhere in that cacophony of possibility, lies one quiet, accurate story. It waits like a single true note beneath an orchestra of rumor, steady, unwavering, patient. And you know you'll keep listening, stripping away intrigue until that note rings clear. Morning paints Old Main's bell tower in pale gold, but the campus mood stays iron gray. You weave through clusters of students huddled on frosted lawns, their voices hushed, eyes darting as if every passerby could be holding a knife beneath. Textbooks, overnight headlines, library horror, co-ed slain sprawl across the Daily Collegian, bold types screaming what no one can say aloud. You taste paper dust on the breeze as newspapers snap open like startled birds. The university president issues a statement from an oak-paneled office, promising full cooperation and renewed vigilance. His words echo across the quad through outdoor speakers usually reserved for pep rallies. Today, they sound like a distant funeral, right? You move closer, smelling damp leaves and fresh turned soil from landscaping crews, bandaging flower beds, an attempt at normalcy in the shadow of violence. Inside dining halls, forks tap china with timid clinks. A blonde sophomore at your table whispers that her mother is pulling her out of school until the killer is caught. Another student, cheeks blotched from sleeplessness, vows never to study alone again. Fear fizzes like soda left open to long flattening resolve, corroding routines. Investigators still question whether this communal dread distorted witness memories beyond repair, clouding details under layers of shared anxiety. You duck into a bustling administration corridor, fluorescent tubes buzzing overhead. A meeting of campus officials spills into view: deans, police chiefs, insurance reps debating liability clauses. One advisor slams a binder. No more open stacks after dark. His demand ripples outward. Library staff must now escort students, turning scholarly freedom into chaperone tours. Critics cry censorship, but petitions for tighter security gather signatures faster than final exam stress ballots. A mainstream historical fact surfaces when a criminology lecturer reminds reporters of the 1966 University of Texas tower shootings. Campus tragedy that forced schools nationwide to rethink security. Penn State suddenly realizes it never hired armed guards for study halls. Budget spreadsheets transform overnight as emergency funds unlock to install badge-only turnstiles and convex mirrors at blind corners. Contractors measure aisles, scribbling notes about panic alarm buttons linked to campus police. You stroll across Pattee's marble foyer, now host to safety pamphlet tables staffed by earnest volunteers distributing whistles and buddy up after dusk stickers. A lanky junior demonstrates a high-pitched alarm device that fits onto key rings. Its shriek rattles skylight glass, drawing groans from overstimulated nerves. Someone jokes too loudly that the library needs metal detectors next. Laughter fizzles, replaced by uneasy silence in a dim side hallway. A rumor board blooms pinned index cards listing supposed sightings. Suspect sketches, library map annotations with red thumbtacks marking danger zones. You study a card that claims a secret tunnel connects Pattee to an abandoned steam plant prime escape route for a killer. Beneath it, another card corrects. The tunnel was sealed in 1957 after asbestos remediation. Campus myths duel in real time, and you, caught between them, feel the floorboards of certainty tilt. A quirky tidbit emerges during an afternoon lecture, when your psychology professor abandons the syllabus to discuss silent scream syndrome. He explains an obscure 1950s French study exploring whether terror can lock the larynx, preventing victims from crying out. He speculates Betsy might have tried to scream but produced no sounder theory, equal parts science and Gothic flourish. Students scribble as if the exam will cover laryngeal paralysis. Some just stare wide-eyed, imagining that trapped silence dot by. Twilight, candlelit vigils, the lawn like constellations. You cup a flickering flame, wax pooling onto knuckles, while a folk guitarist strums Dylan's Blowing in the Wind. The crowd hums the chorus softly. Voices join, tremble, break. Nearby, an art major chalks Betsy's name onto the library. Steps in looping pastel letters that smudge under tearful hands. Two ROTC cadets approach the microphone, announcing a volunteer escort service to walk students home after late study sessions. Their crisp uniforms offer momentary comfort discipline in contrast to bureaucratic fumbling. A chalkboard lists shift, sign-ups, slots fill quickly. You notice someone writing Hefner, with a question mark in the margins. Public suspicion taking tangible form, radio reporters now camp outside the library entrance, cables snaking across stone like nervous veins. A news van antenna rises, beaming campus angst into living rooms statewide. One anchor cites the 1940 Mad Butcher of Cleveland to illustrate how public fear can hamper investigations when false leads pour in. You recall that case dragged on despite citywide curfews and doubled patrols. The killer vanished amid the chaos he spawned. The anchor's implication is clear. Order must temper fear or history will rhyme. Inside student affairs, forms stack like sandbags. Counselors host group therapy in rec rooms where last week's students table-topped over Monopoly. Now they learn breathing exercises to quell panic attacks triggered by the rustle of a turned page. A sophomore confesses she fainted when a classmate dropped a textbook. Adrenaline still buzzes in her fingertips as she speaks. You pass the campus security office. Blueprints cover a corkboard with handwritten notes on new camera placements. A sergeant tests a reel-to-reel tape for a proposed PA panic announcement. Loop his voice monotone. Remain calm. Proceed to nearest exit. He critiques his diction. Across the hall, procurement staff debate bulletproof booth designs for night librarians. Some librarians protest, fearing a prison-like atmosphere, yet they sign hazard pay forms anyway. In the weeks following, lecture attendance soars for criminology electives. Students hungry for understanding pack into auditoriums, filling spiral. Notebooks with theories on modus operandi and victimology. Professors cite the 1931 Leopold and Loeb case, emphasizing how intellectual arrogance sometimes fuels meticulous crimes. Eyes dart to peers, deemed too smart to aloof. You sense trust fracturing an invisible fault line beneath friendships. Month after the murder, the Board of Trustees hosts an open forum. Parents crowd the auditorium, some demand metal detectors. Others blame campus culture for late-hour study expectations. One father slams his fist on a podium, shouting, "My daughter came here for an education, not an execution." Applause erupts, tears follow. The administration promises an external security audit by Pinkerton Consultants. They're black and white. Ads soon peppering local papers. Through it all, you notice subtle shifts in daily routines. Students carry flashlights clipped to belts. Librarians work in pairs. Janitors now sign check-in sheets for every aisle they clean. Even the iconic Nittany Lion statue gleams under new floodlights, as if stone eyes must now stand watch. Late one evening, you climb the library's main staircase and find a fresh bouquet at the landing, white roses tied with a ribbon inscribed Justice. No card. You inhale their sweet calm and wonder who placed them. Security footage, you later learn, shows a shadowed figure in a hooded coat leaving the building at 3:04 a.m. Footage, too grainy to identify. Online message boards decades later will claim the figure returned yearly. Always anonymous, always punctual as finals conclude. Administration reports a 32% drop in after-dark library attendance. Professors adjust, offering daytime study sessions and handing out mimeographed packets just in case you'd rather not risk the stacks. Campus bookstores run out of desk lamps as dorm rooms convert into private reading nooks. The library, once nerve center, grows hushed, its lifeblood of students siphoned away by fear. Yet knowledge demands brave pilgrims. One night, you venture Into level 2 with a small study group, each person armed with a paper cup of nerves disguised as coffee. Fluorescents buzz overhead. Every footstep echoes like a loaded question. Still, you sit amid long shadows and open textbooks, reminding yourself that learning resists terror. Pages turn, pens scratch. Silence no longer feels quite so predatory when shared. In this shared defiance, you sense faint hope uncoiling. Campus life adapts. Safety workshops teach palm heel strikes and whistle blasts. Flyers depict cartoon bobcats brandishing pepper spray. Fear does not vanish. It metabolizes into vigilance. And through this transformation, Betsy's memory persists, not as a cautionary ghost story, but as an urgent demand. Protect curiosity. Protect each other as you walk beneath bare sycamores toward your residence hall. Stainless steel lights. Now dotting the path, you realize the campus shockwave has settled into a new tectonic plate. Buildings stand unchanged, yet everything inside them has shifted. And somewhere out there, beyond lamplight, a killer watches these new rituals unfold, either smug at the upheaval, or restless that the community refuses to crumble. You exhale, a breath you didn't know you'd been holding. Frost crystals swirl in your wake like tiny prisms catching lamplight, hinting at the fragile, refracted hope that maybe, just maybe, vigilance will illuminate what darkness thought forever hidden. The seasons keep cycling over Pattee Library, but the case itself fossilizes strata of rumor compact into lore, and soon you watch a new phenomenon rise. Storytellers mining Betsy's tragedy for pages and airtime. You leaf through the first slim paperback that surfaces in a local bookstore window, its cover blaring crimson text, "Who Killed Betsy?" penned by an enterprising journalist determined to thaw the freeze with ink. Inside, every hunch masquerades as revelation. Footnotes lean on interviews with classmates who barely remember final exam questions, let alone the exact echo of footsteps that November night. Yet the book sells out, students slipping copies between course readers as though contraband. You notice the shift immediately. Once whispered theories, now print bold on newsprint. Talk radio hosts debate Hefner's alibi between advertisements for miracle fry pans. A late-night call-in guest describes smelling Pine-resin in the library basement during a 1974 campus tour. Her anecdote becomes next morning's headline. Investigators still question whether such publicity aids, tips, or simply muddies the waters, creating thousands of false memories that choke real leads. Cold case detectives, long-rotated 2 highway homicide desks, suddenly field renewed letters. One envelope contains a clipping of the book's chapter on the missing shelf gap, circled in red ink with the note, "Look under index 793. The detective checks the original library catalog index 793 lists books on games and riddles. He spends a weekend scanning for code, finds only dusty chess strategies. Still, he files the letter. Another snowflake in a blizzard. Mainstream true crime history slides a new tool onto the scene. 1986. Leicestershire, England, sir. Alec Jeffreys pioneers. DNA fingerprinting, cracking the Colin Pitchfork murders. You watch American investigators marvel, budget for lab upgrades, dream of resurrecting cold files. They box Betsy's dress, seal it against contamination, and ship microscopic fragments to the first stateside lab offering mitochondrial analysis. Weeks later, results return, degraded, inconclusive. Hope spikes, then sags, but the concept of science catching killers decades later lodges deep in collective imagination. By 1987, Unsolved Mysteries televises a segment titled The Silent Stacks, reenacting Betsy's final walk with soft focus lenses and ominous strings. Viewers nationwide lean toward their rabbit ear antennas, scribbling hotline numbers. Reenactors drop books in eerie slow-mo. The actress playing Betsy exhales her last in dramatic hush. Phone boards light up sightings of a tan-coated man in Ohio, confessions from attention seekers. Even a self-proclaimed psychic who dreams of a pine-scented trail leading to a farmhouse cellar produces forward every call. Detectives triage, chasing some, discarding many. None crack the cipher. A quirky tidbit surfaces during one of these tips. A retired janitor swears he once found a single Italian lira coin on the crime scene aisle. Years before the euro existed, he mailed it to police in 1989, claiming the foreign currency felt like a signature. The coin remains in evidence, unlabeled bag scrawled possible. No one can link it to any suspect, but folklore. Perks was the killer, a traveler, a collector, a message leaver. You roll the coin between gloved fingers, noting faint resin residue. Tests reveal only grime. Myth outpaces reality again. Into the 1990s, the book list grows. Murder in the Stacks arrives, thicker. Sourced with police files, accessed through Pennsylvania's new right-to-know laws. The author, a former crime beat reporter, posits campus cover-up administrators allegedly suppressed janitorial logs to dodge lawsuits. Sales soar among conspiracy buffs. Alumni reunions buzz with talk of hidden memos. Yet official archives show only mundane maintenance sheets. The reporter's flourish sells copies, but leaves investigators fielding angry alumni letters demanding the truth. You attend a panel at a true crime convention, Betsy's photo projected. Beside infamous cold cases like the Black Dahlia and Zodiac. Panelists debate whether publicity fuels breakthroughs or breeds carnival. One retired FBI man asserts, media glare revives leads. Another counters, it also makes liars the heroes. Audience members cluster after pitching documentary treatments, each promising to be respectful yet gripping. You note how commerce and justice entwine, sometimes strangling each other. Back at Pattee, the anniversary vigil evolves. Students now carry paperback copies, quoting passages by Flashlight Glow. Someone reads the line describing her final heartbeat, echoing between dusty theology volumes. Embellishing recollection with literary bloom, you realize Betsy's real pulse has been overwritten by rhetorical cadence, dangerously beautiful, hauntingly inaccurate. A mainstream fact interrupts your thoughts. In 1998, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children helps crack the 27-year-old murder of Sherry Morrow through combined witness statements and overlooked evidence. Proof that cold cases can thaw long after initial failures. Inspired, Center County establishes a part-time cold case unit, retrieving Betsy's files from storage. Detectives digitize photos, rescan fingerprints, even 3D map the aisle with laser devices unknown in the 60s. The new tech reveals shelf heights, trajectories, but none point to a specific name. Meanwhile, campus folklore matures into ritual. Freshman orientation tours now include a whispered pause at row 50. Guides encourage students to place a paper crane in the gap where the missing book once rested. By semester's end, the shelf flutters with origami condolences. Some cranes carry scribbled secrets. I know who I felt watched here, he still walks. You collect a few, reading them like found poetry. uncertain which words hide adolescent pranks and which mask terrifying kernels. Podcasting dawns in the 2000s, and amateur sleuths, armed with USB mics, debate resin, Pine, and lira coins. An episode titled The Silent Stab lands on iTunes Top 10 for a week, spiking downloads of previous episodes. Listeners flood Reddit threads with side-by-side comparisons of Hefner's class photos and composite sketches. Branch into competing factions: Team Geology, Team Stranger, Team Ted. Mods struggle to filter doxing. Even in anonymity, the public demands a culprit to pin their terror on. You stand on the 50th anniversary. November 28, 2019. Inside Pattee's renovated commons, LED lights replacing old fluorescents. A new memorial plaque gleams beside a glass case holding first editions of both major books. Students gather in hushed circles, some live streaming 2000s. A librarian reads a prepared statement. Knowledge endures when truth is pursued. Her voice quavers. She was born decades after the crime, yet bears its weight. As cameras flash, you consider the paradox. Greater visibility, yet deeper shadow. The cold case detectives still trudge row by row. Scanning scanner-made 3D reconstructions, hoping technology, perhaps genetic genealogy, the same that unmasked the Golden State Killer in 2018, will salvage something from old evidence. They've uploaded mitochondrial sequences from Betsy's dress to national databases. Hits, 0 for now. Still, a silent countdown ticks. Genealogists work miracles with scant shards, given time. Outside, snow begins to sift down, softening. Campus edges. You watch flakes swirl past the plaque, reminding yourself that stories can warm or chill depending on the teller. Betsy's story remains cold, but the attention books, shows, podcasts keeps a small ember alive. Whether it sparks revelation or smolders into spectacle rests on future hands. A lab intern double-checking resin tests. A retiree remembering a forgotten confession. Or perhaps a distant cousin uploading DNA that brushes the killer's profile. At last, for tonight, the case stays unsolved, yet far from unloved. You close one of the dog-eared books, the spine creaking like an old door, and carry it back to row 50, sliding it into place. You notice the shelf gap has finally vanished, filled by narratives layered atop narrative, history squeezing out silence. The library hums quietly, aware that even if truth still hides, it is now surrounded, cornered by relentless words. You slip on a fresh pair of nitrile gloves, far thinner than the clunky latex investigators wore in 1969, and step into the small, windowless room labeled Cold Case Evidence Lab. Fluorescents buzz overhead, but you barely notice. Your eyes zero in on the familiar artifact. Betsy's crimson dress, now laid beneath a glass plate inside a negative pressure cabinet. Decades of careful storage have preserved it better than memory itself. A technician waves you closer, voice a soft murmur, as though loud tones might disturb the very molecules you are about to examine. She explains the plan. Vacuum-assisted touch DNA sampling, a process refined only in recent years, capable of coaxing microscopic skin cells from fabric weaves once thought barren. You watch her wield a wand the size of a marker pen, its tip lined with tiny foam discs, gently sweeping the area around the wound. Each pass feels like a whispered promise that the cloth might finally speak. The machine hums, drawing traces into sterile tubes sealed within seconds. A screen flickers green each time it registers a viable cell cluster. Hope blooms 3 blips, 4 then stalls at 5. The tech logs the samples, labels them with barcodes destined for a genetics lab. That didn't exist when Betsy walked the earth. Your pulse quickens. You remember how genealogists in 2018 unmasked the Golden State Killer by triangulating a distant cousin's GED match, upload a mainstream landmark that rewrote cold case procedure worldwide. Maybe tonight will echo that miracle. While the samples courier across state lines, you head downstairs to forensic imaging, where a researcher feeds brittle black and white crime scene photos through AI-enhancing software. Algorithms rebuild grainy pixels, sharpening bookshelf edges, clarifying the pattern on discarded dust jackets. On one frame you spot a faint scuff on the floor, teal mark no one noted before. The program highlights it in neon yellow. The researcher theorizes it could be a shoe drag, directionality pointing toward the rarely used East Emergency Stair. He superimposes 3D LiDAR scans from the 2019 shelf survey, and for the first time you perceive the potential path. A single step, pivot, silent retreat. The ghost of a footprint guiding you forward. Back upstairs, you join Captain Sanchez. He replaced Rivera 2 years ago inside a conference room littered with evidence diagrams and half-drained coffee cups. Sanchez scrolls through a dashboard that plots anonymized DNA matches as concentric rings, each shade indicating generational distance. 5 new rings glow faintly, none closer than a third cousin, but patterns cluster around a Pennsylvania Dutch lineage. Sanchez thumbs through census microfilm, digitized last month, hunting surnames that intersect with old Penn State enrollment. Books. You feel the weight of every almost the case has ever known, now condensed into colorful data points dancing on a laptop screen. The clock edges past midnight when the genetics lab calls. You hold your breath, listening to each syllable. The mitochondrial profile is clean, astonishingly sober. It matches Betsy herself, not an assailant. Likely background transfer, her own epithelial cells pressed into fabric during the commotion. As for nuclear DNA, too degraded, your chest deflates like a punctured balloon. Still, the analyst notes an intriguing anomaly. Trace animal DNA. Caninin, the wound channel fibers. A dog hair. Betsy owned no pets, and no canine units entered the crime scene. Quirky as it sounds, a fringe rumor long claimed a husky was seen tied to a bike rack outside the library that evening, its unknown owner pacing nervously. You file the tidbit, unsure if it's a breadcrumb or simply stray contamination from the evidence locker. Morning creeps through Venetian blinds as you relocate to a sound-treated chamber where gunshot acoustic software, now repurposed for blunt sound analysis, examines the original reel-to-reel security tapes. Engineers isolate a low-frequency thud at 4:53 p.m., previously dismissed as books falling. Cross-referenced with shelf dimensions, the thud's waveform suggests a heavier mass than mere paper, possibly Betsy herself hitting the floor. The program extrapolates vibrational decay along iron shelving, offering a mathematical timestamp accurate to within 3 seconds. It can't name a killer, but it places you ringside at the fatal moment. A digital echo of silence. You take a breather, stepping into the cool night air. Campus hums differently, now LED lampposts, card swipe dorms, drones occasionally zipping overhead with library deliveries. Yet row 50 still exists, renovated but unmistakable. You walk the aisle and swipe a finger across a shelf. Dust lifts in motes, lit by motion-activated lights. Your mind replays the new data foot scuff, dog hair, acoustic spike puzzle pieces seeking interlock. Back at headquarters, analysts overlay university vet clinic records onto 1969 student rosters. They locate to geology graduate assistants, Hefner, who walked huskies on campus. One later transferred schools abruptly the following spring. His personnel file cites family emergency, vague as fog. The name prompts a deeper dig. He died in 1988. Car accident. But a surviving nephew lives 3 towns over. Detectives plan an interview, saliva swab kit at the ready. Investigators still question whether this belated lead will forge the missing genetic link or evaporate like so many before. You sit in a briefing and notice an old 35mm slide projector on a side tabula, relic brought in for context. It reminds you of a mainstream case where analog evidence suddenly mattered again in 2004. Dennis Rader, BTK, was caught partly because he used a floppy disk, assuming police couldn't trace metadata. Technology giveth, technology taketh. You wonder if buried hardware in Penn State Archives' an unexamined security badge punch card perhaps might yet betray Betsy's killer. Late afternoon fades to copper when a National Archive courier rolls in a cart bearing 2 sealed boxes recently declassified FBI correspondence with Penn State administrators from early 1970. You pierce the tape and inhale stale paper. Among carbon copies, you find a memo noting a curious postal intercept. A letter addressed to campus security contained a crossword puzzle clipped from the Philadelphia Inquirer, every answer forming an acrostic that spelled "it's over." No fingerprint, no postmark, traceable. Handwriting experts of the era called it juvenile prank. You slide the puzzle under a forensic doc scanner. OCR suggests the answers align with geology terminology, keystone, strata, or The implication coils back to Hefner, but motive remains, sand slipping through fingers. Exhaustion drapes your shoulders. You shut your eyes and picture Betsy's final seconds, again how a single, precise stab unfolded in near-perfect silence. Modern science now circles the wound like never before, but the bull's eye remains empty. Hope, however, feels different. Tonight less about a miracle confession and more about diligent, overlapping circles of data eventually converging. You finish logging notes just as sunrise glazes the sky in apricot. The lab crew gathers for coffee, sleeves rolled, ready to chase the next lead. You join them, feeling that fragile blend of fatigue and determination that powers cold case breakthroughs. Because advances arrive like dawn, incremental, inevitable, unstoppable, even when the night feels endless. You return to the stacks after hours, guided only by the reptilian glow of exit signs and the soft whir of ventilation fans. You're not alone tonight. A trio of undergrads angles smartphone flashlights down narrow aisles, filming a haunted library walkthrough for their channel red-eyed LEDs blink like tiny surveillance drones. Their laughter ricochets off steel shelving until you hush them, reminding them of the memorial plaque downstairs. They nod, more excited than chastened, because adrenaline tastes like clicks and followers, moving deeper. You feel chill, pockets temperature drops, that campus ghost hunters swear mark spectral hotspots. They claim Betsy's spirit patrols row 50 toppling books when anniversary dates approach. One student whispers about footage showing a dictionary sliding a full inch on its own. You raise a probe, eject, drift often traces back to vibration from HVAC vents, but disbelief sells better than truth. You watch them set up a cat ball motion sensor on the carpet, its tiny LED primed to blink at the slightest nudge. Almost immediately, a faint knock echoes 2 rows away. The students freeze. You angle your head, listening, probably settling pipes or perhaps just another curious visitor losing balance against a shelf. Still, goosebumps bloom along your arms. You understand why stories stick. The library breathes an old paper musk that smells just enough like decay to invite the supernatural. On the carpet near a corner study desk, you notice an index card tucked under a chair leg. You reach down, sliding it free, and your pulse skips. Someone has scrawled in looping ballpoint, "Don't look behind you," followed by a tiny doodle of a pine tree. You pivot. Nobody stands there, only rows of titles disappearing into gloom. The undergrads record your reaction, whisper giggling, "Did you plan that?" You shake your head. The note is fresh, the ink still shiny. Quirky offerings like this have appeared for years. Miniature horror valentines left on anniversary eves, sometimes folded into origami cranes, sometimes taped to exit doors. Facility staff collected dozens, then stopped reporting them. Superstition travels faster when official memos mock it. Beneath the hush, you sense the library's psychology at work. Humans crave narrative closure, so myths grow to patch gaps. Evidence never filled. The undergrads launch a spirit box phone app, static churning like distant surf. It spits random syllables. Help, here read. They gasp at read, secure confirmation bias in a pixelated snapshot. You remember a mainstream historical fact. When the Lizzie Borden house opened for overnight tours in the 1990s, visitors insisted the murdered father's ghost responded to cheap EMF detectors. Science never validated the devices, yet bookings sold out. Commerce, fear, and unresolved violence form a tidy braid. You guide the group toward the far wall where daylight once seeped through high windows. They point out rust-brown dots in the marble sill, swearing each aligns with a blood spatter. Arc. You kneel, scrape one with a fingernail. It's iron oxide, residue from a leaky radiator pipe. Myth paints in primary colors. Reality prefers drab mineral stains. Yet stories seldom yield to fact when adrenaline is cheaper. A low rumble overhead startles everyone. Just the freight elevator resetting, but the youngest student clutches your arm, eyes darting. You steady her with a half smile, then remind them softly how terror flourishes in sensory deprivation. The hush of a library at night leaves room for heartbeat percussion, breath solos, the symphony of imagined danger. Turning a corner, you discover a candle stub waxed to the floor, wick charred. Security logs show no open flame permits. Somewhere after closing, someone lit a vigil unsanctioned. You catch pine in the wax-cheap dollar store scent or subtle homage to that lingering resin clue. You pocket the stub in a small evidence pouch. Every echo deserves scrutiny. High above, motion-activated, LEDs flicker awake. Revealing chalked words on a beam, speak her name. Students snap photos. Hashtags bloom in their heads. You recall a time when the phrase belonged to civil rights. Vigils, not haunted house marketing, yet appropriation loves a hook. You also recall that before cell phones, students etched cryptic tributes on study. Carol's library staff sanded them away each summer, only for new ones to rise. The dialogue between memory and maintenance never ends. You lead the group to a seldom used microfilm alcove. There, taped to a reader screen, lies another note. Investigators still question whether you can hear her heart. The open debate phrase turned into performance art. You almost laugh. Whoever staged this knows the case's linguistic tics and wields them like stage directions. The undergrads glance at you, lips parted. You tell them the truth. Her heart stopped before anyone knew she was hurt. The silence is why we're still here. Their expressions, sober, thrill, curving into empathy. A sudden chirp-cat ball blinking back in the aisle. They dash off. You follow at measured pace. When you arrive, the toy has ceased its strobe. They replay phone footage. No visible footstep. Triggered it. Likely vibration from elevator cables. But you let them keep the magic. Wonder, even macabre wonder, can foster respect where sterile corridors once invited apathy. You usher them toward the exit, closing our nears. On the way, you pass the philosophy section, and a spine catches your eye. The ethics of remembering. You slide it free, revealing a gap behind someone-carved letters in the wood backboard. Sorry, Betsy, the tool marks are fine, almost as if etched with a geology pick. Your heartbeat quickens, you snap a photo. Could a contrite killer return? Year after year, maintenance staff inadvertently painting over earlier confessions, or is a modern prankster layering irony? You cannot say, yet the neatness strikes you not frantic graffiti, but deliberate craftsmanship. You tuck the book back, deciding to log the carving with Captain Sanchez's team in the morning. The undergrads now whisper that they caught a cold spot. You tamp the impulse to debunk. Campus legend carries its own value. Each whispered fear re-inflames interest, ensuring the investigation never fully falls silent. Outside, fog drapes the quad. The students thank you, promising to credit Night Watch researcher in their video. You smile, cautioning them to verify facts before posting. They nod, half listening, already editing a thumbnail in their minds. You watch them disappear into mist, tiny screens lighting their faces. Walking back alone, you mull a new dilemma. Every fresh myth attracts amateur detectives, some helpful, others destructive. In 2013, crowdsourced sleuthing after the Boston Marathon bombings misidentified suspects, a mainstream cautionary tale showing digital mobs can derail investigations. You worry the same could happen here if internet rumor outruns evidence. Yet you also recall how tireless web forums cracked the 1987 Bear Brook murders, proving that collective obsession can sometimes outstrip traditional methods. Light and shadow, as always. You reach your office, place the pine-scented candle stub and index card into evidence bags. Tomorrow, labs will test wax composition. Maybe they'll find a fingerprint beneath soot. Conceivably, a modern ritualist is unrelated to the 1969 killer. But patterns matter. If one person keeps leaving pine-themed relics, their DNA might sooner or later connect to old traces clinging to Betsy's dress. You sit, exhale, and jot notes. Cold spot, candle, carving, cat ball. For new entries under urban legends, you underline carving twice, star it. Whether the etcher is genuine or jesting, they engaged physically with the crime scene. Contact leaves residue, microabrasions, slivers of identity. Perhaps the library itself will yet surrender atoms of truth hidden behind tales. A final glance at the window shows fog thinning over Old Main Spire, moonlight slipping through like a scalpel. You realize ghost stories might not solve murders, but they persuade people to keep looking when official files grow brittle. Even myths serve as lanterns, guiding new eyes down old corridors until one finds what decades of lineups, lab tests, and hunches missed. You power off desk lamps, letting Darkness reclaimed the room. Somewhere down in row 50, motion sensors wink off one by one, restoring hush. Whether that hush belongs solely to climate control or also hosts a restless spirit, you leave unanswered. But you believe something else lingers, if not Betsy's ghost, then the resonance of her unfinished story. And resonance, like echoing footsteps, can guide the persistent listener to its source. Dawn fog lifts over the commons, but a heavier haze lingers inside people. You matan, invisible film coating nerves, tightening throats. You recognize it in the library aide who discovered Betsy. Her eyes still flick sideways at every clatter, as though a paperback might sprout teeth. You recognize it in the custodian with the polka dot bandana. He switched to day shift, yet flinches when fluorescent bulbs pop. The murder etched itself into muscle memory, an after image that never quite fades, no matter how many shelves they dust. You attend a closed-door debrief arranged for staff who were on duty that November night. Chairs form an anxious semicircle, while a psychologist borrowed from the campus counseling center guides a breathing exercise. She speaks of critical incident stress, a term still gaining traction even though the event sits decades back. You see knuckles whiten, shoulders rise to ears, and realize silence can traumatize as brutally as gunfire. One retired trooper, named Malloy, confesses he still hears the heartbeat hum of those old library lights in dreams. Whenever a bulb at home flickers, sweat drips down his collar despite central air humming cool. Mainstream psychiatry once had no language for this. PTSD didn't enter the DSM-3 until 1980. Propelled largely by Vietnam veterans, yet its framework now retrofits neatly onto witnesses of violent crime. That historical pivot underscores how countless survivors, library staff, campus police, even curious students who glimpsed Betsy on the gurney walked without proper names for their nightmares. You watch Malloy absorb that fact, eyes damp with a half-century of unspoken weight. Later, you drive to a modest ranch house on a tree-lined cul-de-sac where former Detective Rivera retired. Wind chimes tinkle a fragile soundtrack to a life spent cataloging horrors. Rivera greets you with a handshake that trembles just enough to notice. Over coffee thick as tar, he unspools his private hauntings. He still keeps Betsy's case file on a shelf near family photo albums. Sometimes, he confesses, he pulls it down at 3 a.m., flipping pages until sunrise erases phantoms. You spot dog-eared corners, coffee stains, margins where he scribbled "missing something here" 36 times. A quirky detail emerges when he shows you an old Polaroid of the crime scene. Tucked behind the photo, nearly invisible until he points it out, is a pressed ginkgo leaf. Rivera picked it off Betsy's coat at the morgue. Can't explain why. Says maybe he wanted one living thing to stay with her. He's kept it for decades. Leaf veins now brittle enough to crack it. A sigh. It is the sort of talisman trauma survivors cling to, half guilt offering, half anchor. Rivera guides you to his garage where dusty banker's boxes guard artifacts he couldn't surrender to evidence purges, blown up shelf diagrams, reel to reel, audio copies, even the infamous Italian lira coin critics called irrelevant. He admits nights when he rearranged the diagrams on plywood walls, stringing red yarn like television detectives do, hoping a new angle might swim into view. It never did. Still, the ritual soothed him action in place of helpless recollection, as twilight paints window glass in bruised purples. You join a small reunion of 1970s-era journalism. Students, now grey-haired retirees, who first reported the story for the Daily Collegian. One, named Ellie, recalls typing the headline, "Co-ed, stabbed in library," with hand shaking so badly she hit 3 keys at once. Editors trimmed her adjectives. Emotion, they said, was unprofessional. Tonight, she admits, swallowing trauma behind inverted pyramids and AP style. She shows you the original carbon copy faint smears where teardrops blurred ink across town. A pastor hosts a support circle for families of unsolved murder victims. Betsy's niece attends via video chat, laptop propped on a crocheted throw. She never met her aunt, but the absence shaped family gatherings, an empty chair at Thanksgiving. A constant cautionary tale about late study nights. She says each new podcast dredges tears from Betsy's now elderly sister, who sometimes calls just to hear a living voice after binging an episode that reopens old wounds. Healing, you learn, is fractal, retelling scratches off a scab. Somewhere else, you visit a trooper training academy where recruits pass cold cases to hone investigative grit. The instructor projects Betsy's timeline, marking unknowns in red. Fresh faces lean forward, captivated not only by forensic puzzles, but by the moral gravity of enduring harm. The instructor stresses psychological aftercare, citing decades-long nightmares as cautionary evidence. Investigators still question whether better mental health resources back then might have sharpened focus, perhaps prevented crucial oversights born of fatigue and suppressed shock. That night, campus hosts a candle-lit labyrinth, walker therapeutic exercise borrowed from medieval cathedrals. Participants follow winding paths chalked on the quad, each turn symbolizing steps toward closure. You join the procession, wax glow haloing faces. At the labyrinth's center lies a small table where walkers deposit slips of paper naming fears. Reading them later as a volunteer, you see repeats, silence, no justice, being watched between shelves. Trauma trickles through generations who weren't alive in '69 yet inherit unease like heirloom jewelry. Inside Pattee, new directional floor lights project subtle arrow patterns, guiding late-night scholars along monitored routes. Architectural therapy for anxious minds. You observe a sophomore freeze when her laptop battery dies, plunging her row into darkness. Within seconds, security staff appear, calm and practiced. Proof that institutional nerves have rewired toward hypervigilance. Relief washes her face, but embarrassment quickly masks it. Trauma breeds paradox, craving safety while hating vulnerability. Back in row 50, you test an acoustics kiosk installed last year. Students can press headphones to listen to ambient reassurance, soft rustle of turning pages, distant rain, heart rate lowering frequencies. It's science meets ritual, acknowledging the library's wound without surrendering to it. The kiosk credits research from 1997 showing certain binaural tones ease hypervigilance in crime survivors. Practical or performative, it helps. You feel shoulders unclench just by standing nearby. You arrange a dinner meeting with Dr. Naomi Pierce, a criminologist who lectures on community mnemonic load, the weight unsolved crimes place on collective memory. Between bites of pot pie, she notes how communities unburden through monuments, documentaries, even ghost legends. Without such outlets, she says, fear curdles into apathy or scapegoating. She cites the Atlanta child murders case, 197981, as proof. Public outcry spurred reforms, but also bred conspiracy pits that consumed rational discourse. The balance is razor thin. Pierce pulls from her tote a thin diary donated by a deceased campus cop's widow. Inside, 1972 entries record weekly visits to the library. Cop, sitting alone among theology texts, whispering, "Show me." Under stress, he apparently sought dialogue with an empty aisle. Some pages tear where he scratched them out, ashamed perhaps. You run gloved fingers over indent lines. Trauma can carve deeper than knives. Your final visit tonight is to Malloy's favorite fishing pond. A mirror still expands under July stars. He casts silently, line unfurling, then confides he once tried hypnosis to retrieve the fleeing men's faces. All he saw was swirling pine forest, no library at all. He laughs, softly, self-mockery, tinged with relief. Maybe forgetting kept him sane. You hand him a business card for a modern trauma therapist specializing in law enforcement, PTSD. He pockets it, silent acknowledgement that wounds require tending. Even 56 years on, driving back, windows down, you sense the cases. Psychological footprints sprawled wider than campus maps, its edges bleeding into countless personal stories, each with their own echoes. And you know that solving Betsy's murder would matter far beyond justice. It would release pressure trapped in minds and muscles, hearts and hallways. Closure, after all, isn't just a verdict, it's the moment silence finally lets itself exhale, making room for living voices again. You push through the revolving doors of the new Center County Justice Center, feeling the bustle of fluorescent-lit optimism brush against your cheeks. This place smells nothing like the old precinct, no lingering cigarette haze, no stale paper odor, just fresh paint and ambition. You're here because the Cold Case Task Force has reconvened under a shiny banner reading Project Reopen. Since 2023, Pennsylvania funds have flowed to revisit dormant files, and Betsy's case perches at the top of the priority list, like a persistent robin refusing winter. Captain Sanchez greets you in a glass-walled conference room where LED screens glow with color-coded timelines. Arrayed before him are bankers' boxes stamped sealed. Records only recently pried loose after a clutch of freedom of information petitions from curious podcasters and, notably, Betsy's own niece. You can almost hear old detectives grumble from beyond the grave at their secrets. Being unboxed, like holiday decor, a civilian archivist slides nitrile gloves onto trembling hands and slices the first seal. Inside, carbon copy memos nestle beside brittle Polaroids. Some pages still faintly carry the lemon cleaner scent of that fateful night, as if molecules of 1969 have time-traveled. You tilt a photo toward the light and see the missing book gap once more. Only now the grain resolves into sharpness, a thin sliver of silhouette in the edge of the frame. Shoulder and partial elbow overlooked because early investigators focused on Betsy's form. Software enhancement marks that silhouette in red, tagging it possible person of interest, number 7. Your pulse quickens. Maybe the ghost finally has shape. A data analyst cues up a 3D reconstruction on the main screen. Thanks to photogrammetry scans taken during the 2019 renovation, she meshes the old layout with new AI-clarified pictures. Shelves ghost into view, transparent polygons flickering. A digital avatarial stand in walks Betsy's path. Shows probable attacker routes, then freezes at the silhouette's coordinates. On-screen distance markers appear, 2 strides to exit, 1 to vanish behind a pillar newly installed in 1968 for structural support. That detail explains why earlier reconstructions missed his line of sight. Escape software lacked architectural updates. Everyone exhales, exhilarated and annoyed by such a small shift, rewriting decades of assumption. Next, the archivist unrolls a sealed microfilm spool, labeled Student Disciplinary Logs, 1968 to 1970. Turns out, campus conduct hearings were kept separate from police files and only merged this year. Among routine infractions, beer in dorms, overdue fee sits, a curious entry, RCH reprimanded for unauthorized lab access. Pine-resin theft noted. RCH, as you know, matches Richard Charles Hefner's initials. Quirky tidbit. Absolutely no report ever cited resin theft before. Your eyebrows rise like stage curtains. Even dusty abbreviations can trigger fresh applause. Sanchez's team crosslinks that log with procurement records, discovering a batch of geological sample boxes containing pine pitch sealed fossils returned late. December 69. The chain of custody forms list Hefner as sign out and sign in. For decades, the pitch seemed irrelevant. Now resin sits center stage again. You imagine Hefner hunched in a lab after Thanksgiving. Pine scent clinging to clothes, perhaps the same clothes, described by those two frightened witnesses. A forensic botanist arrives to test leftover resin chips under Ramon spectroscopy. She babbles excitedly about peak patterns indicating tree species. Turns out, Pinus strobus, eastern white pine, rare in imported resin but common in Pennsylvania's own woodlands, could point to a local craft, not a fancy Italian stiletto after all. You marvel at science, nibbling clues from crumbs no one thought to taste, while the lab hums. Legal counsel wheels in another trove-sealed grand jury testimony boxes, declassified, after statutory limits expired. Here lie transcripts of whispered allegations, including one from a librarian who, in 1970, claimed an unnamed administrator ordered certain mop heads misplaced before troopers arrived. The testimony was sealed to protect reputations, but decades later, the names matter less than the potential obstruction. Investigators still question whether that missing custodial equipment held latent prints or trace fibers forever lost. The phrase hangs heavy in the room. After 56 years, even minuscule sabotage feels monumental. You step into the corridor for a breather, and the elevator doors slide open, revealing a smiling tech holding a portable genealogical kit. He's fresh from knocking at a nephew's door, the very relative of that geology assistant who once walked huskies across campus. A cheek swab nestles in the cooler like an ivory promise. If his mitochondrial markers triangulate closer to Betsy's touch DNA, dark doors might swing wide. The tech winks. Results could drop within weeks. Science runs marathons and sprints these days. Back in the war room, interns sift paper for overlooked fingerprints. They dust with new fluorescent nanoparticles that bind to trace amino acids, even on aged cellulose. Under laser light, 3 partial prints emerge on a letter once dismissed as blank scrap. Automated comparison pings a match not to Hefner, but to a long-dead assistant dean who perished in 1974. Conspiracy theories ignite again, but Sanchez reminds everyone an administrator handling correspondence isn't suspicious. Still, the prints get catalog data first, drama later. A historical criminology consultant Skypes in, referencing the 2003 capture of Green River killer Gary Ridgway, Mainstream, fact illustrating tenacity coupled with improved forensics. Ridgway evaded justice for 20 years until polymerase chain reaction advances pinned him. The lesson underscores today's excitement. No statute of limitations on murder. No limit on persistence. Night deepens, and a graduate student from Digital Humanities unveils a VR headset, She spent her thesis year coding a walkthrough of 1969. Pattee Library using architectural archives and oral histories. You slip the headset on. Suddenly, the stacks envelop you in flickering tube-like gloom. A faint hum vibrates your skull. You retrace Betsy's last steps, guided by subtle haptic pulses marking contemporary evidence placements. There, by row 50, digital motes highlight the new silhouette zone. You pivot, follow the escape line, push through the emergency stair. Door its latch indeed half open. The sensation is eerie yet clarifying. Removing the headset, you understand how spatial intelligence can translate dormant clues into tangible insight. As midnight tilts into morning, coffee cups replenish. A junior detective reads the Italian liras. Mint year, 1953. She notes that 1953 coins circulated heavily among American servicemen returning from Cold War tours. She flags veterans in the 1969 student body list, another funnel to cross with. Pine-related lab access. Pattern matching tightens like a bowstring. You pause, considering the human side again. Betsy's sister, now frail but fiery, watches progress via nightly email summaries. She replies with 3 words. Keep going, please. Those pixels weigh more than any banker's box. Closure isn't abstract. It's an elderly woman sleeping easier, a retired aide finally shelving fear, a community untensing shoulders grown, stiff with what-ifs. Before leaving, you pass the evidence room where Betsy's dress rests, sampling complete. It seems smaller than memory, as though decades of grief shrank its fabric. Yet you sense power inside those fibers, the dormant electricity of justice inches from ignition. Fingers on glass, you whisper to the empty hallway, almost there. Stepping outside, dawn mist halos streetlights. Project Reopen may fail, or flourish, but hope now has hardware, software, and perhaps most vital fresh eyes, refusing cynicism. You inhale cool air, tinged with distant pine, and think of a line from that ethics book. Some silences end because they must, others because someone finally dares to listen long enough. Tonight, you choose daring. You stand beneath late summer stars on the quad, the library's brick facade, glowing warm amber as night settles. The investigation's gears still turn behind those walls, but for a moment you let the noise fade and turn your mind to Betsy. Herself, you picture her walking across this same lawn a lifetime ago, 22. Bright scarf, fluttering, arms brimming with textbooks on Victorian reform. She loved sentences that tried to fix the world, and now you listen for her footsteps in the hush, wondering what untold chapters she carried. A gentle breeze stirs treetops, and you imagine her pausing to tuck hair behind one ear, unaware the horizon of her life was already narrowing to a single, silent aisle. You stroll toward Old Maine's marble steps, recalling letters Betsy mailed, home fragments now digitized in an online archive. One line sticks. Libraries are like cathedrals of every possible tomorrow. That hope shines in her cramped cursive, a quirky tidbit preserved in ink. The words feel heavier knowing tomorrow never arrived. In their wake, students formed the Betsy Aardsma Memorial Scholarship. Modest at first, funded by bake sales and spare change jars. Today, it endows research grants for grad students investigating women's safety on campuses worldwide. Each year, recipients gather under the ginkgo tree planted in her honor, reading abstracts aloud while lanterns flicker against dusk, living proof that tragedy can germinate something quietly defiant. Inside Pattee, you pass a glass case holding Betsy's favorite maroon sweater donated by her family, fabric still faintly lavender-scented. A plaque explains she wore it volunteering at a Head Start program the week before her death. You rest 2 fingers on the glass, feeling a pulse of warmth beneath chill air conditioning. Even artifacts seem to remember. Walking deeper, you notice shelves curve gently now. Architects softened hard lines after the murder, as if architecture could cradle grief. A librarian wheels by, morning tea steaming in hand, nodding with practiced calm. Staff still perform daily quiet checks, part security sweep, part ritual. They drift through stacks, listening for distress. A living echo of the night, no one heard anything at all. On level 2, you hear faint laughter study group sharing. A meme, decades ago, silence reigned. Today the library hosts mindfulness rooms, emergency call buttons sparkle blue, and digital kiosks broadcast hotline numbers. Policies born of Betsy's absence shield countless present hearts. The mainstream record shows other campuses followed suit. After the 2006 murder of Annie La at Yale, universities nationwide installed electronic access controls, Volution seeded in part by what happened here. Safety, you realize, is inheritance as much as architecture. Sun slips lower, and lights blink on above row 50. You trace the aisle, reaching the newly installed commemorative panel. Holographic text forms when angled, just right Betsy's own. Quote about cathedrals of tomorrow. Beneath, digital candles flicker. Visitors tap screens, leaving messages that orbit in gentle constellations, tiny galaxies of empathy. One reads, "I passed my thesis defense today because libraries felt safe. Thank you, Betsy." Another. Investigators still question whether closure will come, but until then, your story fuels our vigilance. You exhale sharply. The open debate phrase, reframed as gratitude, feels like justice's heartbeat. Faint, yet present. Pausing at shelf 793, one suspected hiding place, you notice a new copy of The Ethics of Remembering. Spine uncreased. It sits beside a first edition of Who Killed Betsy. Pages yellowed. The juxtaposition reminds you that storytelling wields double edges. It preserves, yet can exploit. Under tempered leads, the balance appears steady, facts and compassion sharing space. Downstairs, a night tour assembles. Guide whispers a moratorium on jump scares tonight isn't about ghosts, but resilience. He gestures to a pressure plate embedded under carpet. Step there, and an LED map highlights for fastest exits. Tech funded by campus safety grants, nicknamed Betsy Lights. Students try it, impressed. You watch their shoulders drop. Awareness replaces anxiety, and quiet returns to a gentle hush rather than stifling fear. Outside again, you circle the ginkgo. Its leaves fan out like tiny golden hearts. Each autumn, they carpet the lawn, volunteers sweeping them into archival packets sent to Betsy's family. Her sister lines dresser drawers with the scent, saying it keeps memories soft, not sharp. You kneel, retrieve one fallen leaf, and slide it into your notebook, an echo of Rivera's brittle keepsake. Trauma once pressed him flat. For you, the leaf feels hopeful. Veins pulsing with sun captured all summer. You glance toward distant hills, where white pines crown the ridgeline, resin scented on night air. Captain Sanchez still waits on genealogical results. Maybe the pine will finally point at a name. You imagine headlines, cold case cracked after 60 years. But even if that day never arrives, Betsy's story has already reshaped corridors, minds, policies. Proof legacies can bloom without verdicts. Resolution matters, yes, but meaning also sprouts from how people carry forward. refusing indifference, walking back toward dorm-lit pathways. You consider this. Every person touched by the investigation, detectives, witnesses, podcasters, librarians, students, now holds a fragment of Betsy's tomorrow. These fragments weave a tapestry stronger than the single thread violence tried to cut. You step onto brickwork, still warm from day sun, turning once to look at Pattee's high windows, amber, squares glowing like watchful eyes. In their reflection, you glimpse your silhouette small, but upright, bearing witness. The library stands, the scholarship endures. The scholarship recipients push boundaries Betsy might have explored herself. That is legacy, motion where silence once reigned. You exhale, let night breeze carry your breath into the dark. Somewhere behind brick and glass, blood-stained fabric rests, evidence lights hum, and databases crunch DNA, alleles. Justice may stride in tomorrow or wander for years, but either way, the campus no longer waits in terror. It walks forward, heads high, because it learned to illuminate every shadow. You flick the ginkgo leaf between fingers, tuck it safe inside your jacket, and join the flow of students laughing beneath lamplight, moving ever onward. The campus settles into its nocturne, and you slow your pace, letting each breath draw longer, gentler. Buildings that bustled by daylight now stand quiet, their windows glowing like far-off lanterns, casting a mellow halo across freshly cut grass. Crickets stitch a low, even rhythm in the background, a subtle lullaby threading through warm night air. You feel your shoulders relax, muscles unclenching after carrying so many names. So many echoes dot as you walk, tree branches sway just enough to whisper, leaves brushing one another in soft applause. Footfalls grow lighter on the brick path, each step measured, unhurried. The hush no longer feels heavy. It feels protective, like a quilt laid across the quad. Far away, a fountain murmurs steady syllables that blend with your heartbeat, guiding it towards slower tempo, calmer tide. Lifting your gaze, you find constellations peeking between drifting clouds, pinpricks of silver, reminding you that mysteries live everywhere, yet so does clarity. The cool air tastes faintly of pine and possibility, soothing your lungs as it fills them. You picture Betsy's ginkgo tree, leaves folding for sleep, roots deep and steadier, quiet sentinel promising tomorrows. Sunlight lights in library windows, dim one by one, libraries preparing their own rest. Pages, once rustled in frenzy, now lie still, words nesting until dawn invites them back into curious hands. You inhale, hold, then release, letting tension slip away like bookmarks sliding from finished chapters. If your eyes grow heavy, that's all right. Let lids drift downward. Let whispers fade to silence. The night keeps watch, gentle and alert. Your story can pause here, safe, waiting for morning's gentlest light. Sweet dreams.